This one's for Jan Roach. Jan's been sending me a number of comments, and you all who are paying attention to the comment part would have seen those. Most of them aren't in the form of questions, but one of them is, and it's a good one. It follows on the heels of the last conversation we had, which was about the use of the eye as an impressionist, as a Boston School impressionist. I may as well say, again, I'll refer to the Boston School, but it's simply the background I come from in part, and it's my long history of reviewing it as well as working in a way that's rather like the way they work. Mindsets rather similar. And primarily what we mean by that, is that it's impressionistic, but we don't mean it's impressionistic, meaning Monet and broken color all the time, every minute. And it's a more comprehensive approach to Impressionism, which is why I refer to it as, and Gamble actually referred to it as, an evolution of Impressionism. So it moved from being just broken color and the pursuit of light at whatever cost to really a different kind of incorporation of silhouette that wasn't characteristic of Monet. And in fact, in my early training, it wasn't characteristic of my early training either, which came out of some guys who had studied directly with Monet. That training had you getting toward the edge by the time you got to the very end of a picture. And I say the edge, where values meet. Like you have a shadow side, and there's the haystack by Monet, and it's cut out by the brightness of the sky, and you'll see a silhouette there. The Boston School guys will incorporate those silhouettes early and often as part of the general big impression. And of course, the big impression is the Velázquez conversation as well. So let me read Jan's question to you, and then as I said, it follows on the heels of that last conversation about the use of the eye. I think that was John Peterson who asked that. I have been meaning actually not to use your last names. You may like it or maybe you don't. So you put them online. I'll try to stick with just Jan in this one. This is, she says, this is unique to Boston School, throwing eyes out of focus. But how often do you do it? And so I responded to her actually, and I hope you'll look at that comment that I made. But I responded to her, and then I realized she was asking me how often I did it, and as opposed to what, following up on this discussion about what it is. So I thought of something I should add to what we talked about last week, though. It's really quite serious and significant in the way a person who paints like I do thinks and uses his eyes. And I'll answer the question of how often, if I don't forget, at the very end. But let's talk about what it is where we might be doing this often or that often. And that is the defocusing or the popping of the eyes or the throwing the eyes out of focus. That's actually a misleading concept. We don't really throw our eyes out of focus. The only time you do that is if you're blurring down to see what the prominent effects are and to organize them, to see what things you don't have to deal with right now, what things you must deal with right now. That's why you blur your eye down. But that's the only reason that I really have to blur the eye. So you're not really throwing your eye out of focus. You're just not zooming in to a spot. So I call it simultaneity of focus that we actually do. And I suggested to her that what you might try doing yourself is just looking, you might be looking toward the camera, but take in the whole rest of the room that you have that camera, your monitor. Look toward that, but take in the whole rest of the room you're looking at and don't focus on anything, right? And you'll see what I'm talking about. It's really simultaneity of focus. So I think of it as, if you've ever seen Porter, I'm trying to think of the name of and I think I mentioned him last time, but who's the photographer who would set a camera out and when he was finished, you'd see every blade of grass in perfect focus, whatever he was doing. Well, it's rather like that. So you create this field that's equal. You don't zoom in and look here and then have to unfocus and then zoom in and look over there and try to figure out what just happened. You actually look simultaneously at everything in equal focus. And that way you can let your mind wander from left to right and observe the relationships of colors without a whole lot of, you can move your eyes, but you maintain this idea of that field, that unified field. So that's when you get to the discussion that Decamp brought up, where he said you actually are painting, you never look past the picture plane. But the picture plane, and you'll see this in the whole history of painting, that paintings are always, virtually all, done without the idea of focus and fuzz at the edges. That's really a camera idea. And the reason for most of it initially was because you're a storyteller and you want every little person away, even in the distance. If you're looking at a Perugino or Raphael or a tree in the distance, you want it to be seen as that. You're not painting atmosphere and vague relationships that might otherwise exist in the purely visual sense of looking. So there was an equality of vision and equality of treatment, relatively speaking. And the only limitation would be that things would get so small you couldn't do much more than just tick at them, but that would be the limitation. It wasn't because you were trying to do something out of focus or to do a focused thing with it. Even when you're looking at Vermeer's, he's using a lens, apparently. It does appear that he's using a lens to do his work, but it looks like he's fundamentally tried to create an equality of focus. And I'll try to put up on the screen, just as I talk about this, that image of the artist in the studio. Actually, I think I have it flopping around here somewhere. Oh, well, I don't know where it would be. But I'll try to remember to put that Vermeer up there so you can look at it. But the equality of focus, like everything is sort of cut out equally. Well, as I said, that comes initially from the cutout way of working. But even when you go to Impressionism, you don't switch to being a guy with blurry edges. Despite the conversations, by the way, about Paxton's you find on Wikipedia, which I think I disagree with. And there's something about them that he did, something about what they're talking about, this person is talking about, that's true, but it's not precisely true in my view, in my experience. And I think my training supports that, the background that I have with Gamel talking about Paxton. But that's something you'll have to look at and deal with for yourself. But the idea that's really important is the idea of the picture plane and seeing everything equally. Because the edge relationship of an area over here, the edge of something over here is in a relationship to the edge of something over there. And the truth of those relationships requires you to not be zooming in and guessing, and then zooming out and zooming back. It requires you to see them simultaneously. And so that's what I think of. I think maybe a better term for it is afocus, but still it's not that. It's simultaneity of focus. So you're not zooming. So maybe you should say it's a-zooming, okay? But the simultaneity of focus is really a key to this thing. So then the answer to the question about how often you do it is you do it all the time, because the only way to check stuff is with the equality of your eye always before you. And by the way, that's one of those times when you begin to see the music. When you're dealing with the picture plane simultaneously, you're inevitably going to see, when you see a particular blue, shall we say, and you'll see it picking up some other blue somewhere else, it's only happening because you're not looking at this thing as an object, and even as a blue. You're just looking over there. And one of the things I tell students, by the way, as soon as I ask you, you should have a reflex action when I say to you, what color is that? Your eye should immediately go to everywhere else except where the color is you're looking at. And the reason is because that color is determined by all the other colors. What it is a function of all the other colors. And that's just pure, deep, rich Impressionism as practiced by anybody who, after a bit of research into it. It does require an incredibly naive eye. You really have got to get yourself all the way over to where you're just doing shapes and sizes and things, and you're not saying what size is the apple, or what size is the nose, or what size anything is, or that it's a nose. You just, you look over there when you're doing, for example, you're trying to correct a painting, you look over there, or even when you're laying in a Boston School painting or an Impressionist painting, you just look out there at the field and you say red X, blue, red Y, and you're setting up colors around it. You say dark is dark and light is light, and here they are sitting in a relationship to each other. That's a world that we live in. It doesn't know what things are. It's just because the world we're doing it. What we're actually doing is we're transferring in a not sight-size way. We're transferring the set of relationships onto a canvas, the set of relationships of color, the set of relationships of edge, of effect, of size, and all those things. So I'll look again at. I wrote the comments out. Let me just look for a second at the comments I made, and I think I'm finished with this one otherwise. But I just wanted to clarify that. Actually, on the wrong page. Here we go. Okay, it was all painting. Yeah. Yeah. Apart from just doing an attack on site size, I think we can call this a day. Okay. Very nice to be back. We've been gone for a couple of weeks. I know we'll be good in the future. The setup today, actually, we're trying to set up something where I can be on my own and do more of this, even if my producer can't be around, and my camera guy. So thank you very much again, and don't forget to subscribe. When am I going to ever memorize this group? Comment, share especially, and whatever the other one was. What is the other one? So anyway, thanks. See ya.